Welcome to Lecture 2, Transportation Role in Global Trade Planning. Today, we're going to have an overview of global transportation, as well as look at the challenges of global transportation. Every year, hundreds of billions of tons of cargo are moved globally by the different modes of transportation, such as ships, trucks, railway, and planes. Global transportation involves the physical flow of goods, supported by effective information flows between the exporter and the importer, as well as timely flows of payment. To kick off the process, the buyer and the seller must negotiate and agree on multiple details to protect their individual financial interests and reduce their risk. Some of the basic details includes things like the price, quality, quantity, and payment mode. Exporters are concerned about non-payment. Importers are concerned about quality, quantity, and delivery. The terms of payment spells out clearly how payment is to be made. In an open account, the payment is made after delivery, giving the buyer zero risk. In cash in advance mode, the payment is made before delivery, giving the seller zero risk. The most commonly used mode is the LC. The buyer's bank issues an LC to the seller guaranteeing payment once goods are delivered according to specific requirements. The terms of trade spells out the roles and responsibilities of the buyer and seller. Example, who clears the goods for export at origin or for import at destination, who arranges for the transportation, and who pays for the transportation, insurance, and custom duties. Incoterms or international commercial terms are a harmonized set of terms established by the International Chamber of Commerce in 1936. It became necessary to have standardized definitions that allowed for clear communication between buyers and sellers with regards to the tasks, costs, and risks associated with global transportation and delivery of goods. Some of the areas defined by Incoterms include mode of delivery, arrangement of customs clearances and licenses, passage of title, transfer of risk, and insurance responsibilities, delivery terms, responsibility for transport costs, etc. However, it is to be noted that Incoterms do not themselves define contractual rights and liabilities, nor do they cover obligations with regards to goods prior to and after delivery. Incoterms 2010 was the 8th edition that was published by the ICC, and Incoterms 2020 is expected to be released soon and will be effective from January 1st, 2020. Part of the agreement between the buyer and seller will also certainly cover mode selection, carrier selection, and routing. Mode selection refers to the choice of transportation mode used to transport the cargo. The first consideration is, of course, accessibility. Is it actually possible to use a particular mode? For road transport, the destination must be connected to an appropriate road network. For railway transport, the destination must be connected to a railway network. For water transport, the destination must be connected to a water body, like the sea or a river. For air transport, there must actually be an airport or an area suitable for landing an aircraft at the destination. Next, we look at capacity. Ships have the largest capacity by far, which is why 90% of the world trade is moved by sea. Railway has moderate capacity. Planes have limited capacity, since most planes are used primarily for passenger transport and actually only carry small amounts of cargo. Trucks have the smallest capacity relative to all the other three modes. Transit time achievable by each mode varies greatly depending on origin and destination locations. Generally, planes are the fastest, followed by trucks. Traditionally, railway trains operate at much lower speeds than trucks. While high-speed rail passenger trains are common in many parts of the world, very few high-speed rail freight trains are used. Container ships, of course, sail at relatively slow speeds of around 24 knots and could take days to weeks to complete a voyage. Considering the relative transit times, it doesn't come as a surprise that for the same journey, planes would cost the most, followed by trucks, and then the trains, and lastly the ships. So besides considerations of accessibility, capacity, transit time, and cost, there are also sometimes other legal restrictions. For example, dangerous goods such as explosives and flammable substances are prohibited on aircraft. Once the mode is selected, then it is time to choose the carrier. The carrier refers to the actual airline, shipping line, or railway operator, etc., which will be moving the goods. The primary considerations are usually rates and capabilities, but increasingly, service levels such as on-time delivery and pickup and service failure response have also become very important areas of consideration. Lastly, insurance coverage and financial liabilities in the event of damage, loss, or delay are also clearly spelled out in any agreement between a buyer and a seller. Cargo insurance is critical due to the exposure of cargo to many perils when freight moves through the global supply chain. These include damage due to cargo movement or exposure to water or fire, loss of cargo due to sinking, crashing, theft or hijacking, and delays due to breakdowns. Cargo insurance is often necessary because there are national laws and global regulations which limit a carrier's liability. Examples of local laws in Singapore include the Carriage of Goods by Sea and by Air Act. Examples of global regulations include the Hague Rules and the Warsaw Convention. The Hague Rules is the international code defining the rights and liabilities of a shipping company regarding its cargo. Under the Hague Rules, the shipper bears the cost of lost and damaged goods if they cannot prove that the carrier's vessel was unseaworthy, improperly manned, or unable to safely transport and preserve their cargo. The Warsaw Convention is an international convention which regulates liability for international carriage of persons, luggage, or goods performed by an aircraft for reward, created by experts in aviation law in Warsaw in 1929. One key regulation stipulates that the liability of a carrier in the case of destruction, loss, damage, or delay is actually only limited to 32 Sing dollars per kilogram of cargo. In addition, carriers are also not responsible for loss or damage arising from uncontrollable circumstances, acts of God or acts of man, which are collectively known as force majeure. An act of God is a natural hazard outside human control for which no person can be held responsible. These include many types of natural phenomena, including earthquakes, tsunamis, typhoons, cyclones, volcanic eruptions, just to name a few. An act of man refers to hazards for which carriers cannot be held responsible for, including strikes, war, or riots. Shippers may take different approaches to managing their risk. Risk retention or self-insurance is when a company absorbs any potential losses. This is often the approach for low-value goods not susceptible to damage or when there is extreme confidence in their carriers. Risk transfer is when they purchase cargo insurance to cover the full value of the cargo, and usually a mixed approach is taken whereby an insurance policy covers partial value of the cargo. Overall, transport planning seeks to achieve the following objectives: align with the corporate strategies, control risk to the company, provide the required level of customer service, and ensure a total landed cost of products that is competitive in the marketplace. So what drives global trade? Free trade agreements, or FTAs. These are pacts between two or more countries or areas in which all participants agree to lift most or all tariffs, quotas, special fees and taxes, and other barriers to trade between the entities. FTAs cut the red tape and allow faster and more business between the countries or areas, which should benefit all participants. The FTA-driven growth in trade between countries has led to a greater need for international freight transportation. How big is Singapore's trade in goods? The total imports and exports for Singapore has been growing at a steady rate and was recorded at more than 1 billion in 2018. One of the key contributing factors is Singapore's network of FTAs. In fact, Singapore has an extensive network of 13 bilateral FTAs and 12 regional FTAs. Bilateral FTAs are agreements signed between Singapore and a single trading partner. The 13 countries with signed FTAs with Singapore come from different parts of the world and include China, India, Japan, Korea, and the United States. Regional FTAs are agreements signed between Singapore and a group of trading partners. The majority of Singapore's regional FTAs are signed as a member of ASEAN or Association of Southeast Asian Nations. On the flip side of FTAs, trade wars between countries have a negative impact on trade and lead to disruptions in international freight transportation. A good example is the current trade war going on between US and China. In a series of tit-for-tat measures in 2019, increasing amounts of tariffs have been levied by both countries on goods being imported from the other country. Companies such as Apple, which build most of their products in China, are already starting to feel the impact of this war. With its products now facing a 15% tariff, Apple has reportedly asked its major suppliers to assess the cost implications of moving part of the production capacity to countries in Southeast Asia. If this happens, there will be a corresponding shift in the global transport patterns. One of the major challenges in global transportation is maintaining that visibility and control of freight as it moves across borders as it's being handed off between carriers and intermediaries. One of the key ways of maintaining visibility and controlling freight from origin to destination is through an extensive array of freight documentation. Proper freight documentation ensures compliance and will facilitate the uninterrupted flow of goods. Missing or incorrect paperwork, on the other hand, can cause delays and additional costs for the company. Some examples of this documentation include invoices, which specify the identity, quantity, and price of goods being sold, export licenses, which are government documentation authorizing the export of goods, and certificates of origin, COO, which are statements specifying the goods were shipped from a particular country, certificates of inspection, which attest to authenticity, and a bill of lading, which acts as a contract of carriage between the transporter and the cargo owner. Besides freight documentation, technology also plays a part in controlling freight. Paper-based processes are not always cost-effective, nor do they serve the needs of the industry well. Increasingly, each transportation sector has started using technology for timely information sharing to vastly improve their shipment visibility. For example, the International Air Transport Association, IATA, has been using e-freight, an online system which aims to take the paper out of air cargo and replace it with an exchange of electronic data and messages. Cargo often travels long distances and pass through multiple facilities and numerous intermediaries in different locations before reaching the final destination. There can be varying standards of transportation infrastructure, governmental regulations, and service options. This great complexity comes with a great potential for disruption at every step of the way. Shifting supply chain trends of outsourcing, near-sourcing, and insourcing directly impacts transportation demand. So what do these terms mean? For a company, outsourcing just means getting a supplier or vendor outside the company to provide a service. These services now include almost everything, from warehousing to transportation to manufacturing, finance, IT, human resources, and call centers, just to name a few. But not all outsourcing journeys have ended happily. For example, in 2006, the Lego Group outsourced the production of Lego bricks to Flextronics, one of the world's largest contract manufacturers. Within 2 years, the Lego Group terminated the partnership and brought production home. Switching to closer vendors from those located further away is a business strategy known as near-sourcing. While outsourcing to far-off countries such as China with lower labor costs remains strong, some companies are rethinking their strategies due to global political unrest, rising fuel costs, growing demand for quick delivery times, and wage inflation in many developing countries. With so much uncertainty in the equation, moving to nearer countries even at higher upfront costs is sometimes not such a bad idea after all. Overall, the only constant has been change. The continuously evolving political, economic, environmental landscape leads to constant trade level fluctuations and has resulted in sometimes unpredictable transportation demand. As carriers struggle to remain competitive and keep their businesses afloat, in the ever-changing environment, one trend that has emerged is that of mergers and acquisitions. When this happens, the supply of transportation services and the dynamics within the industry changes. Last but not least, security risk in an increasingly digitalized economy makes it more difficult for carriers to safeguard their business data and increases their operating costs as they have to invest in additional technology and manpower. With that, we've come to the end of Lecture 2. See you next time!